Hi, I'm Alex. This is a video sharing my personal evolution on how I see queer people and queer culture. From being confused and uncomfortable with gay and trans people to the type of person that puts queer pride symbols in their videos. This video was made with two audiences in mind. The first is for anyone who currently has negative feelings about queer people, but wants to understand better where those feelings might be coming from. The other audience is people looking to engage with the first audience. Maybe you want to create some mutual understanding with the ultimate goal of coming together and making a path forward. Or maybe you just want to understand those people better in order to protect yourself and the people you care about. Two warnings. I'm going to briefly talk about a time that I was sexually assaulted and retell part of a trans person's story being assaulted. The other warning is that I'm going to use a few words that are considered slurs by today's standards once each, because I want to be completely clear about what words I'm talking about to an extremely broad audience. We're going to ease into it, but it's going to get super fucking real. So buckle up. Initiate dream sequence. As far back as kindergarten, I remember being attracted to girls and women, but I knew what being gay meant around elementary school because I was raised by my grandparents and they fucking loved Elton John.
When the heart of the star-crossed Voyager beats in time with yours.
True story, the first concert I ever went to was Elton John at like 8, and then 5 years later the next one was Rob fucking Zombie. I was a lower middle class white kid who grew up in a super diverse community in the Vancouver, Washington, Portland, Oregon area. I had lots of black and brown friends, many of them first generation or second generation immigrants from a million different places. But I can't say I met a single openly queer person until I got to high school. Maybe that had something to do with gay being a really common insult at the time. I don't know.
Good morning.
Morning to you.
Why are you gay?
Being raised by my grandparents, a trucker and a post office worker, I never have the newest clothes. Often I'd get secondhand stuff or extremely poorly fitted and out of fashion clothes. This is one of the reasons that when I started to experience real bullying, it came in the form of being called gay. The most memorable example of this was in 6th grade. I think it was like 11 or 12. I wore these white cotton athletic shorts with this extremely thin, literally like an inch or less, dark red trim at the bottom of the leg holes that had faded into this like violet color. I've gone by AJ throughout my life on and off because Alex was just a really common name in a lot of my schools. At some point, one of the kids bullying me decided that calling me AGay was funnier than calling me faggot. That name really pissed me off because a lot of people thought it was really funny, including my friends. My good friends. It wasn't until I moved 3,000 miles away to live with my mother and stepdad at 16 that I got the relief of no longer hearing it daily. This is what I consider my first phase of queer awareness. I knew that gay people existed, but I thought they were a really rare thing. I wasn't gay, but I knew that acting or being perceived as gay would lead people to treat you poorly. Even though I didn't feel any personal animosity towards gay people, I still participated in homophobic teasing, like calling things gay as a replacement for bad, and feeling extreme insecurity at being perceived as gay. I moved to Alaska for my junior and senior year of high school. A lot of culture shock because I ended up going to the most affluent school in Anchorage at the time. It was also extremely white. I'm talking like maybe 10 to 20 black people in a school of 2,000. And although I think I knew of openly gay people at that point, I never actually met or talked to them until I started working at Best Buy after I left high school. The first openly gay person I interacted with consistently was a line level employee at Best Buy, just like me. Let's call him John. John and I actually went to the same high school, and apparently he knew who I was, even though we didn't have any classes together. That wasn't really weird because I did all the sports in high school, so it wasn't really uncommon to hear my name over the loudspeaker at events and assemblies. John liked to make comments about being attracted to me, always framed as a joke, but the type of joke that's clearly testing the waters. It started as relatively low-level stuff. Things like, those pants make your butt look good, which I felt mixed about. Even as a skilled athlete, I was pretty shy and had body image issues. So even though I was uncomfortable because I wasn't interested in John the way that he was interested in me, it still was a little confidence boosting. Over the 5 or so years we worked together, compliments at some point transformed into propositions. Like, hey, if you want, we can just go out to my car and I'll blow you. He would often talk like this in front of other employees who didn't act like it was a big deal. And so because I didn't want to appear weak or sensitive, I just made jokes to break the tension. If you ever wonder how some people get so funny, sometimes it's trauma. One time I was standing in a group of people around the customer service desk near the front of the store. It was a bunch of employees just shooting the shit, including John, who was sitting in a chair right next to me. I don't recall what the hell we were talking about, but at some point, John took his hand and cup checked me. That is to say that he took his hand, pressed it against the crotch of my pants, touching my dick, and then pulled it away, saying, smaller than I thought. Like I said, I played lots of sports. Shit like this, between friends fucking around, wasn't unheard of. But me and my friends didn't do this, and the way John did it upset me on a lot of levels. I was pissed because he already made me uncomfortable with his comments, and I assumed that if I just rolled with it, which I did for fucking years, he wouldn't keep escalating. I wasn't attracted to him, and he knew that because I made that incredibly clear. So him violating my trust changed the nature of our relationship for me. And to top it off, at the time, I had a major fear of showing my naked body to people because of penis size shame that's always been a part of masculinity. When he said my dick was small, even though it wasn't erect and I wasn't sexually excited in any way, it really dug into those insecurities. All of those feelings hit me like a punch to the face. And I looked at John and I said, if you ever do that to me again, I'm gonna beat the fucking shit out of you. And then I walked away. Pretty much everybody who was there came up to me later and told me that they thought it was out of line, which made me feel better. And it eventually just became a thing between me and my friends that was like, remember when that weird thing happened? I never reported it to managers or anybody who could have done anything. I continued to work with him for years, and he never did that again. But he did continue to make sexual comments about me and to me until I moved back to the Vancouver area in 2009. That move is how I mark my second phase of understanding queer culture. I finally got some personal experience with queer people, but it fed into some of the stereotypes about gay men being predators. And I think because of personally living in a poorer, more diverse community, I didn't see John's actions as being intrinsic to being gay. I didn't connect this at the time, but this never stop spitting game until you fuck me attitude feels more connected to him being a man. Why are the jokes about lesbians moving in together too quickly and the jokes about gay men being promiscuous? Maybe there's something there connected to masculinity. I don't know.
Everything that women do to protect themselves from men are all things that gay men do to find other men. Be alone at night in a park and stare at him directly in the eye.
Hopefully it's easy to see how many different people could have been shaped in different ways from this experience. Even if they weren't the ones that were touched, I could see how stories like mine could lead witnesses to generalize the behavior onto other queer people. To be completely honest, I still feel uncomfortable around gay men sometimes, but it usually fades the moment I start talking to them. I have no idea where John is today, but last I heard, he was wearing a lot of red hats around 2016. Not to make my own generalities about personality, but it feels like there's a connection there as far as thinking about how your actions make other people feel in regards to their body.
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Whatever you want. Grab them by the pussy.
Between 2006 and 2011, I met a whole bunch of queer people. An extremely effeminate gay man who loved photography and guns, the more traditional butch lesbian stereotype, and a gay dude who had the same hitting on me sense of humor, but never crossed the line. In all my time working retail, I can recall seeing occasionally people who today I would assume are trans. Knowing what I know now about trans-affirming care, I would assume that they weren't doing any formal therapy like HRT. They did not pass as women to most people. It was a spectacle when they came into the stores because employees would stop stocking CDs or printing labels or hitting on other coworkers and start gawking. I only remember noticing trans women. They would usually come in during the mornings when there was a lot less people around, and that was not something I connected the dots between until I sat down to write this video. I was uncomfortable seeing them because often they had very masculine features. The ones that got the most attention were significantly larger than me. Not that I'm a big dude at 5'8", 170, but they were often over 6 foot, which made it really hard for them not to stick out. Was the term that I found on the internet and was used by adults that didn't seem like they were trying to be offensive in any way. What that meant to me at the time was someone who did gender reassignment surgery and transitioned from being a man to a woman or vice versa, which honestly sounded horrifying to me. At the time, I put it in the same category as people who voluntarily amputated a limb because they didn't feel like it should be there. It's your body, whatever makes you happy, but it gives me this intrusive thought of chopping my own arm off, you know? The term I heard more commonly was tranny, sometimes to be dismissive, but often it was just because people didn't have the language or understanding to know what other words to use. What has always been complicated about that word is that the first time me and all my friends heard it was in the automotive context because it's an extremely common shorthand for transmission. It's the computer nerd equivalent of changing terms like blacklist to blocklist. It's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but it's also asking people to change something that is deeply connected to a totally different context, and they aren't getting anything in return. I mean, sure, they get the satisfaction of being a kind and empathetic person, but the value of that is pretty subjective. I remember being uncomfortable seeing trans women because I associated them with some of the same negative feelings I had about gay men. In a lot of ways, the late 2000s normalized queer identities through pop culture. Even with this normalization, people were still commonly using homophobic slurs as insults. And older generations were way less influenced by the outside world to change their language and perspectives. I hope that there's nowhere in the United States today that would have people openly talking shit about a specific trans person that they are looking at in like a Best Buy, but it probably still happens. I am pretty confident that at some point I participated in dehumanizing insults about trans people as a way of trying to be cool or funny or just prevent people from calling me gay. I try to keep that in mind and hold space for the possibility that someone saying or doing transphobic things today is doing it as a defense mechanism created by the culture they grew up in. But it's really hard to tell sometimes. I've noticed for many trans people, this is empathy level impossible. And I totally get it. I think people like me, who are more aligned with the lived experience of these people, are the best avatars for this. We're far enough away from the issue to avoid most of the emotional damage that comes along with their behavior. And to be honest, they don't usually listen to queer people and women. Sad but true. Sad but fucking true.
You sound like a gay.
I left retail in 2012 when I moved to Seattle, and that ended my third phase of queer awareness, which was this deepening understanding of queer culture and getting my first exposure to trans identities. This is the phase where for the first time, I'm engaging with openly queer people, and I'm shifting my behavior away from homophobic slurs to words like That's right, we shifted from homophobic to ableist, because I guess that's the next lowest rung in the totem pole. Fast forward to 2017. All right, let's talk about what I call my ascension. I started my YouTube channel, and shortly after that, the whole cop thing happened. In case you're new here, I was riding my motorcycle to work one day when an off-duty detective pulled a gun on me in the middle of the street. I was running a GoPro at the time, so I got the entire thing on film, fortunately, and that led me down this path of suing my local sheriff's department and winning over a 2-year period. So I'm making YouTube videos talking about this situation when a younger looking dude, they seem to be somewhere in the ballpark of like 17 to 20. Let's call him Billy. Reached out to me on Twitter because they were doing criminal law and was interested in my situation and how I was handling it. At the time, I was extremely standoffish because I already had a whole bunch of heat on me from this incident going viral. Random people were messaging me on Twitter saying that they were going to call my job and make shit up about me or complain about shit I had said publicly. And there was people posting my address in like comment sections and shit. It was fucking scary. I had like just hit over 1,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, and I was not ready or aware of what parasocial relationships were. So I kind of humored Billy, but tried not to engage too much. Over the months, he would keep DMing me here and there, and although he was an awkward kid, he obviously liked me and my videos. Eventually, I got more comfortable, and it seemed clear that he was just trying to help me, so over time, I finally started to actually engage with him for real. And when I decided to start a Discord, he was the first person to join. One day, and I can't express how out of nowhere that this felt for me, they started wearing wigs and going by the name Brenda. It is very possible that I was so unaware of the trans experience that I totally missed every hint she dropped. She did talk about dating men prior, but I missed anything else, and I definitely wasn't looking for it. At this point, I had known her more than a year, and I didn't want to offend her, so I just rolled with it. I listened, I empathized, and used her new pronouns because obviously the old ones were extremely upsetting. Her family was religious and sent her to a Christian conversion camp where they subjected her to various forms of what personally, I would consider torture to try to ungay her. At one point, Brenda talked about a group project she was doing with some people, and one of the students wouldn't use her preferred name, and she ended up needing to go to the top levels of her school's administration to get it to stop. That same person called the cops on Brenda, basically saying that she was going to shoot up the school with this gun she carried in her car for protection. It seems like her parents stopped giving her the same level of support for college, and so she started escorting and doing other forms of sex work. There was a particularly scary story she told me where a man turned violent, grabbing her throat to the point where she thought she was gonna pass out, and he only stopped when she pulled her gun out on him. Eventually, she transitioned to camming, which had the benefits of being safer and being a more flexible schedule, but had the downside of the all-male clientele fetishizing her penis, and she fucking hated that. Let me slow down here for the primary audience, because her penis might sound strange to you. It definitely would have been to me for most of my life. To me, Brenda felt like society would never treat her like a woman as long as she had her penis. She talked about it like it was a cancerous tumor hanging between her legs that was slowly killing her. Some trans women love their penis and aren't as concerned about fitting into the man penis, woman vagina box, you know? I apologize if I'm offending anyone for the sake of simplicity, and please correct me in the comments or come scream at me in Discord if you want. Eventually, though, she found out she was still on her parents' insurance, even though they told her they had removed her. So she went to Miami and got bottom surgery there. In addition to paying the 15 or 20 grand, whatever it ended up being, with insurance, she had to take 2 weeks off to recover in a hotel nearby before flying back. That was a requirement for the surgery because she still had to meet with doctors for aftercare. And that meant paying for a hotel as well, and she needed to find a friend who could stay with her for the entire 2 weeks. That's a big ask for a lot of people. Meeting Brenda and getting this arm's length view of the challenges of the trans experience was my ascension to who I am today. I unintentionally and unknowingly made a trans friend. And that experience is why I have zero reservations that trans people deserve the same humanity that everyone else does. This doesn't scale though. We don't have enough trans people to partner them up with everyone in the fucking world and get on the same page. So that led me to ask the question, what can I do about this? We're now finally at the part where I answer the question that initiated this video in the first place. Why is there a trans flag up in my videos? So I explained how I went from basically knowing nothing about queer culture to accepting and supporting queer people, but lots of YouTube people are allies and don't have flags up. With motorcycle content, the core viewer base is 95% men. That's the demographic that is far more likely to have a negative association with queer symbols, and so is far less likely to thumbs up a video, subscribe, support someone with them, and far more likely to potentially try to harm me or my content. There's like a lot of negative pressures not to put them up. So why do I do it? I'm going to explain and wrap this all up with one final story. In June 2020, there were protests all around the country sparked by the killing of George Floyd. I was stoked for this because it finally felt like people were mad about the same shit I was mad about, and we were going to fight back against these out of control cops and justice system to get some fucking accountability.
Obviously, everyone with their hands up, including me. I'm very good at it. I've got a lot. Oh, all right, we rolling. That's obviously fucking. Oh, look, they're playing with their fucking toys. Holy shit! Oh, fuck me. Well, we rolling. Oh shit! Holy shit!
Heroes! Every one of you, heroes! Oh my God!
I went to marches. I protested at City Hall. And when the cops just got up and left their precinct because they were so fucking scared of thousands of people chanting in the streets to put a goddamn leash on them after they tear gassed a peaceful assembly, even though not a single cop was killed in the nearly month-long protests and occupation of the downtown area. I went down to the Capitol Hill occupied protests, aka the CHOP, aka the Chaz, whenever I could. It was impossible to not notice that the people at the front of these marches directing things and just generally making shit happen were mostly black, brown, and queer people. Fuck, the entire 1,100 person Seattle Police Department couldn't do it. And yet, these were the soldiers on the front lines getting hit with bicycles and tear gas and flashbangs and fucking cars, all while directing people with megaphones. I found them, the ones doing the work that makes change actually happen, to be inspiring. And I feel like those are my people. So I decided to do what a lot of restaurants and bars and coffee shops do in Seattle. I put up pride flags to try to get people that might look at me and think, God damn, that's an Aryan looking motherfucker. I bet he hates me for who I am. To give me just a moment to explain myself. What I realized a year plus into having the flags up is that it's great at doing exactly what I wanted it to do. I've heard many times from people that I very much respect that they dismissed me before they saw those up, which I totally get. But the other thing that the flags do is provide a unique opportunity to intervene with people who have hangups with queer people. I see it happen. People watch my videos, they get entertained, they start to develop a relationship with me, and then a symbol that they've been trained to hate shows up in the background, and that creates some complex emotions that lead them to leave a comment. And when they do that, I can engage with them and potentially lead them down their own path to exploring queer culture. Even if I don't bring them up to my level, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. Maybe they'll be at least a little less likely to leave a shitty comment on someone else's channel, or use different arguments, or just not comment at all, which feels like praxis to me. We can't have two dudes yell at each other on the internet for an hour and expect to solve any of the problems that matter to our daily lives. We have to be converting people, which means we need to be selling. And I'm an exceptionally good salesman, so why wouldn't I do as much of that as possible? I made this video because I want you, yeah, literally you watching right now, I want you to be able to convert people, but you gotta be able to take care of yourself first, because none of us, including me, can do this without you. I have recently been having a harder time keeping things together in my life, so I've had to do more checking in with myself, noticing when I'm feeling burnout. That could lead me to make mistakes. I ride fast. I take chances. Unintentional unaliving yourself does happen. I think the best use of time for most of us is to focus on supporting the people around you. Friends, family, coworkers, and the people living in your city. The challenging part about this is that sometimes they won't even ask for it, and might not even seem to need it, because humans can be very good at hiding problems. I'm gonna die someday, no matter what I do. And I've watched people die in hospital beds. I don't know if that's for me. I think I'd rather die on my bike or in the streets. But before I do, I'd like to change the world.
Because unless we make our art, and that's our art as lives, our lives as art, into something collective and of utility and aggressively designed to change the world and make it better, then we run the risk, I'm afraid, of just making crap video essays. And you can tell me that that's all we're doing. You can say it in the comments below. I don't give a flying fuck. But I hope you can at least see from this that we don't want to just make video essays. The idea is to prevent suicides, to prevent genocides. I actually want to save the world. Do you want to save the world? Can we admit that to each other? Do you want to save the world?
I want to save the world. Do you want to save the world?